1. This story happened nearly 1 year ago. Backstory. In computing class we had, like in any other class too, some competent, some incompetent, and some lazy students. The main task was programming with Java. Since I loved coding, I already worked a lot with Java before we used it in school. This wasn't a secret, so many came to ask me instead of our teacher for help. The teacher was already busy helping others, and kind as I am, I helped every time as good as I can. But after some time, something started. The lazy guys walked through the room and looked on the other's code and copied it. With some time and minimal effort, they made their code working and got through the years. Me, a C# developer, ignored most of Java's conventions. I wrote method names with capital letters, handled get and set methods as C# like as I could, so none of mine had a get or set in his name, and so on. This saved my code from being pirated. And now we had our last project. Over more than 2 months we worked on this, and again the code piracy started. But since it was a more complex project than anything we had done before, it was hard to copy something completely. It was simply too large to explain similarities. The malicious compliance. Like every time, I had no exact idea. I started around 10 projects, and finished 2 large and 1 simple. Then in the last week, one of the laziest came to me and asked if I could make him a project. Since I had one completed that I wasn't proud enough to present, I gave it to him. He thanked me and took it. He played a bit with it to show how it works, and that was it. He doesn't even take a single look in the source code. This meant I used multiple classes, something many don't understand and didn't use. I used packages to sort my classes, something only our teacher also did. I fully documented my code and used my special documentation comments we never spoke about in class. I used my typical style no one else used, since Java shouldn't look like this. Still, it worked fine. I had signed them with my name. On top, I placed all my projects in our shared folder, like everyone else, and because of this, my copy was there first. He was one of the last who presented, and like with every other project, our teacher asked him to show us some code and explain parts he was really proud of. So he opened a file, and the first thing was the information about the author, me, so he told that he used this to build his project on. Our teacher allowed us to take parts from elsewhere, as long as we marked them as others' work. And opened another file, and the first thing was the information about the author. But since this was already where he thought it would be, he scrolled down as fast as he could so no one could see the author. Now everyone could see my special style of coding. He ignored this and made some vague comments which explained nothing. Then he closed the file but kept the overview open. In the overview, you can clearly see the name of the project. Like everywhere else, I also made the package names more C#-like. It was like bdev.app.projectname. There were 2 more problems. First, I sent all my projects with bdev, capital B, capital D, small e, small v. Something obviously no one else would do. Second, in Java, all package names are with lowercase. We never learned with uppercase. Our teacher smiled all the time. He already looked into our project, so he could ask if he didn't understand what we did. Unlikely, or he isn't sure which grade we deserve, so we could show additional knowledge or not. The first thing he asked is, what does @author bdev mean? I don't know what he got in all. I'm sure it wasn't great. I didn't get in any trouble, no one even knew I gave it to him. Like I said, it was already in our shared folder, so anyone can access it. 2. This all started with my dad being offered a job, and a condition that the boss set me up with one as well. I was fresh out of school and was looking around for jobs, when my dad calls me and asks me to come for an interview for a delivery job. I quickly scatter off to the shower and make it there within 30 minutes. The boss, John, seemed to be nice and was supportive of me going to take a month of leave to study full-time for my truck license. YKB in Sweden and EU. After the interview and signing the contract, I went to the restroom and overheard John chewing out a colleague of mine for something that was not his fault. I was hoping it was just a stressful day, but boy was I wrong. I came back the next day for work. I meet up with my colleague who was temporarily driving the route I was going to have. He was there to train me and give me instructions, etc. He tells me about the workplace and tells me that everyone hates John. Still, I wanted to make up my own mind in the matter and decided to mostly ignore the small talk. In all of the trucks, there are supposed to be papers showing all of the stops and rules for deliveries. There were none in this particular vehicle. We ask John if we can have one, and he begins screaming at my coworker about how he's responsible for it, even though he only has this route for a week, temporarily. After this, I promptly tell my boss the exact date of the course I told him about, seeing as I only told him November through December, the first time. He tells me, "That's a long time, but you can always postpone it, so it's fine." He knew the length of the course before getting my contract, and the course cost $3,600, and not refundable. I tell him this and he explodes. I decide to waddle out of there, but now he has this massive grudge against me. My father gets a new contract with his current company with a much bigger payout, and decides to stick with it. This makes my boss even angrier. At me. My boss then tries to mess with my hours and pay, holding back several $100s, which I got after talking to the company department. After this, I realize I don't want to work here. He tells me that he can offer a truck job after I get my license, and I answer, "Yeah, that's good." Day after day, he chews me out for things not in my control, and begins to do everything legally in his power to make my shift worse for me, so I do the same toward him. As a delivery driver, I have to be nice to customers, etc., etc. One of the things I did for the customers is holding out on my break to get there in time. I had to deliver everything by 7 a.m., and I start my shift at 1 a.m. Legally, I have to take a 30-minute break after 6 hours of work. The route was terribly planned, and very often I'd just have minutes left, or even worse. I'd be at the last stop by exactly 7. One particular day I was late because we had lots of goods to deliver. I had 3 stops when the clock strikes 7, so I take my break. Customers start calling, but I don't pick up because I don't have to do so on my break. My boss calls me by the end of my break and complains about my deliveries not being on time. I explain that I was on break, and he tells me I can always postpone it. I tell him no, I cannot do that, because the law requires me to take a break at 7 a.m., and he gets furious. The next day, a system-wide message gets sent saying, "We have to deliver by 7 a.m. because complaints have been coming in. We are about to lose a massive customer." This customer, which we deliver goods for to their customers, was roughly half of the company income. The following 2 days was the same story, lots to do, and I take my break. My boss leaves 11 voicemails on my break, and I call him back when I'm back on the clock. He begins ranting on and on about how terrible I am and such. He tells me I can leave the keys when I get back, and never come back to the job. After my leave, a few co-workers call me and tell me they resigned. The company now lacks half the drivers and can't manage the workload by themselves. The company loses their biggest client and promptly fires most staff before selling half the company to someone else. Last I checked, they're not doing too good, because John is still there and nobody wants to work there. Their reputation is spread. I've heard from everyone partaking in the same course as me that the company is a hellhole and going downhill. 3. So I'm staying at this nice hotel, and I get free breakfast with my room. I go downstairs and sit down for breakfast. It's a nice buffet. There's an egg station where you can fill out a card and they make the egg you order. Anyways, from behind me I hear this shrill voice, none other but a Karen. Now I'm in Asia, so there is a Karen who are even worse. Since they pay, and pay goes to the waiters, they think they own said waiters. Anyway, she keeps yelling "waiter," but the place was understaffed at the moment. The egg guy, 2 waiters, and the check-in lady. There were maybe 15 people eating breakfast at the time. "Be with you in a moment." Fine. A few minutes later, the waitress stops by Karen's table. "I never asked for ham in my omelet." "Okay, I'll check your slip." Comes back in a moment. "Ma'am, you did check the box for ham. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. We'll make you another one as soon as possible." "No, I want it now." "Ma'am, we have other customers to attend to." "I don't care. You need to satisfy everyone here, and I'm not satisfied. Make me another egg, now. No ham." The egg guy must have heard, because he did not look pleased. The waitress walked over and told him Karen's order, and I could see a big grin show across his face. He started making the new omelet, and seeing this, Karen seemed happy, but kept an eye on the process from her seat. A guy says from across the room, "You wanted extra ham, right?"
No ham at all."
"Sorry, can't hear you." As he said this, he locked eyes with her and he poured the entire bowl of ham into the egg, and Karen let out a screech, like she just saw Satan suck her child's toes. After the banshee screech, she of course started yelling about how she demanded to see the hotel manager, as any Karen would. It took them about 20 minutes to call them over, and by the time he was there were more staff, and I was almost finished eating. He of course asked what was going on and why she was screeching like a demon, and they finally managed to calm her down. After going into the kitchen for a quick chat with the omelet guy and the waitress, he came back out, apologized to Karen for the trouble, and the bitch got away with a free breakfast for her trouble. Now you may think she got off easy, and even a free breakfast, but the way my hotel works is, if they feel really sorry, they'll actually compensate you with maybe another night at the hotel, free drinks, room service keys. But free breakfast is the least they ever give out, so it's easy to get. So really, she just got a whining present, and in all honesty, it cost the hotel nothing. The bitch is probably going to show up tomorrow at breakfast and have something similar happen. We'll see. I'll head down tomorrow just to watch it unravel. 4. So today I was at the hospital for a medical checkup, and I was running about half an hour late because my taxi was stuck in traffic. Anyways, I walk onto the elevator at the 15th floor, and behind me I hear, "Ugh, such a lack of manners." There's 3 people on the elevator. Me, Boomer, and a sweet old lady. I look around confused and asked, "Wait, me?" And Boomer responds, "Of course you. You walked in front of a lady." And I started explaining I was late for an appointment and in a big hurry, and his response was tough. And he started diving into how my parents must be terrible and brought me up even worse because I had no basic manners. The whole time, the sweet old lady was trying to tell him it was okay and I'd done nothing wrong. Only walked about 5 feet in front of her. Eventually, she got off and Boomer started muttering to himself something about uncultured prick. Now he was getting off on floor 29. I did the reasonable thing when getting off and ran my hand across the panel, lighting up every single floor. 5. Bit of significant background, but necessary, I think. My previous job, I was a cashier working at a casino in my hometown. It was an international organization that had several casinos in 2 countries. I quite enjoyed my job and became quite proficient in the workings of the casino, as I'm one of those people who like knowing how different things work and fit together for the whole picture. My boss was hard, but fair. More importantly was he provided an environment where we could grow and professionally develop if you had the incentive. Needless to say, I participated a lot. High roller transactions, government reporting and compliance, in addition to being part of a team that implemented new management software and new equipment for the casino. I was a relief shift manager in addition to my regular duties, and was briefly promoted to shift manager before I decided to decline the promotion during the probation period, knowing full well I may have hurt further progression. Whilst my boss was good, upper management was garbage, and had been for years, fostering an environment where lower management were fighting among themselves. They wanted to fire my boss but couldn't, so they instead put huge pressure on him to leave. He didn't leave. Then they hired 2 shift managers and gave them free rein to implement changes, and got the senior cashiers who did relief work, myself included, to train them up. Suffice to say, they resented this, but did not ask themselves why not one of us wanted to apply for the promotion. With free rein to implement changes and reporting directly to my boss's boss, who wanted him gone, my boss was effectively sidelined. The new manager started trying to change things without understanding what they were doing or what effect it would have on multiple departments, which pissed off a lot of my coworkers who eventually stopped trying to help and train them because they couldn't accept that we knew more about their job than they did. One day, one of them approached me because a spreadsheet wasn't working properly, and being the person who updated the sheet, I immediately saw that someone had been messing around with the sheet, changing cell sizing, layouts, which resulted in several formula breaking. I said I was reverting it back because someone had been messing with it, to which I was told it was the other shift manager, and if I didn't like the change, I should have applied for the position. Then and there I decided I had enough. Told her I was reverting it because almost all of our spreadsheets were linked to other files in finance, and that they could have fucked up a lot of stuff because of change. If you're going to change something, fine, but at least know what you're doing first. I left her to stew on that in silence. I was the last person who was helping them at that point, and that had just stopped. A couple of months later, both resigned because they couldn't cope with the work, nor cope with the fact that every single employee in our department no longer liked them. I later found out that in their exit interviews, both of them complained very loudly against most of the senior cashiers who were supposed to be training them, myself included. Fast forward a month. I was entering the next few weeks' schedule into our roster system during a relief shift. As I do with some mundane tasks, I might poke around to see what functions the software has that can help me do my task more efficiently. I was looking into a template option and trying to copy a previous month when I discovered staff costs on the side, effectively wages. Since I work with numbers, being a cashier, it was really easy to see that one of the previous managers was paid at entry manager rate. However, the other was paid an absurdly high figure. I reported the fact that I accidentally stumbled across staff cost information to the other shift manager, who had been there for years. She asked me to show her, so I did, and I heard nothing further of it. Being good with numbers, she also noticed the two previous shift managers' salary, especially the one being paid a large amount. A couple months later, a 2IC for the department was transferred from another casino within the company, and some months after that, my boss negotiated a nice severance package. Immediately, there were certain restrictive changes implemented which hurt morale further. Later, one of my colleagues accepted a promotion to shift manager and asked me if his salary offer was fair, since he had no reference point to go by, as part of management's control was to keep people in the dark and competing against each other. I told him what my offer had been, and spoke a bit on how they decided on their offers based on my own experience, adding that at the end I thought it was reasonable. The next day I mentioned the conversation to the older shift manager, who freaked out a little, thinking that I had discussed her salary with my colleague, but also asked if I still had access to the wage info, to which I replied that it was probably still there. A day after that, I was notified that I was being called into HR for a meeting due to a breach of confidentiality issue. As this fell in my day off, as I left my shift, I emailed that I was not able to attend the meeting and detailed the conversation I had with my colleague. A few hours later, they sent me an email stating I was being stood down immediately with pay and would notify me of the next meeting. At this point, I started getting distressed as I realized that now my previous boss was gone, they were systematically looking for an excuse to get rid of specific people across all departments. Everyone in my department was systematically interviewed, and they tried to dig up any dirt they could find on me. They had nothing and kept looking and looking. A week turned into two turned into three. At the end of the third week, I was asked to come in for a meeting on the Monday, beginning of the fourth week. I came in with a friend as a support person and sat down with my boss and the HR rep. Their entire focus was on the conversation 10 months prior, when I raised the issue of me discovering wage information with my supervisor. This conversation wasn't recorded, and all they had was my written statement about the conversations I had and what the older shift supervisor had said. They decided that was sufficient to issue me with a first and final warning, but also stand me down from relief work and revoke access to the scheduler software. I calmly told them fine. I disagree with their decision, as it was unreasonable being based off of a 10-month-old conversation with no formal record, and that I was looking for another job. They asked what kind of job I was looking for, to which I responded that it was none of their business. They had the nerve to expect me to work that day. I simply told them that after 3 weeks of uncertainty I was stressed and not able to return for another week, and would bring them a medical certificate. I took the outcome to my union, who attempted to negotiate a better outcome, but nothing changed. When I returned to work, I discovered that they had revoked much more than what was agreed on. I no longer was on certain email distribution lists, which meant I was in the dark for the majority of things going on. I was somehow expected to do certain tasks, but without the necessary access. I decided right there and then that I was doing the bare minimum, and if I didn't have the required access, I would not do any related tasks. They opted to go with the petty route. I laid down my groundwork. I became uncooperative with instructions sent via email because I didn't actually receive the email, not on the mailing list. They issued me with a written warning for not following instructions, so I started using up my sick leave for stress. I had a lot saved up from 6 years before handing in my 4 weeks' notice. They opted to pay me out instead of having me return, probably thinking that I would try to do something malicious if I returned. Joke's on them. Most staff in my department had a personal folder in the department's network drive, where they kept stuff like training notes, resumes, etc., which was publicly accessible but also a private network drive linked to your login. Most didn't use the private drive as we couldn't access it on the main network that the user terminals were on, but the department's network drive was. After the crap they put me through previously, I had cleared out my 6 years' worth of notes and personal documentation for our public access folders, and moved them into my personal employee drive on the network, which is where they should have been kept in the first place. This included configuration settings and options for various machines and software that we used. No one else, not even IT, had as comprehensive documentation as mine, or spent the time I did coherently learning how the various systems worked together in detail. Once IT processed my employee withdrawal, that stuff was gone. I heard down the grapevine a few months later they were frantically trying to find my notes to fix a serious issue. Not to mention smaller time-consuming issues that occur on occasion. Haven't looked back since. Just to clarify, the only documents I moved were my own personal notes and references. Training materials were not touched. Same with vendor reference documentation. If other people don't want to learn the nuances of their systems and how they interact, then that is on them. I moved my notes as an afterthought, as I didn't want people going through my stuff. And I realize this is only one side of the story, and you may disagree with my actions, which is fair. Upper management were attempting to create as meek a workforce as they possibly could, as they were wanting to look good to investors. Dozens of staff across multiple departments were pressured to resign, or literally sidelined by new hires. The casino was sold around 8 months after I left. 6. The backstory. I work at a corporate McDonald's in Michigan, and I won't get into too much detail because it will definitely give away where I live. The most important part of this backstory is that it is a corporate store, and it is definitely harder to get rid of a problem manager because they have company protection. This means that issues keep getting brought up with no resolution, and we lose employees as a result. Our store fluctuates heavily between being overstaffed and being so understaffed that we can't function. Most of the reasons for quitting at my store are the result of one manager. The manager in question, let's call her Jane, pretty regularly won't let employees clock in if they've had an altercation on Jane's last shift. Jane is a department manager, in charge of the kitchen with 2 other department managers, taking over guest service and people management. Now, a fellow crew member, Terry, had recently changed her schedule because of class and was mistakenly scheduled 4 shifts outside her new availability. No problem, right? Wrong. All 4 of these wrongly scheduled shifts were Jane's shifts. They had a 3-hour-long fight about clocking in on Terry's 5th shift for the week, because our scheduling manager and general manager both weren't answering their phones. Terry and I are both cross-trained in grill and service, and most of the time I am stuck back in grill with maybe 2 or 3 more people, and Terry being scheduled outside her availability did screw me. But I didn't blame Terry for leaving me a man down. It's safe to say that these 2 hate each other very much. Something to understand about McDonald's in the US is that most of the stores don't roll their own breakfast burritos. We are given the sausage, pepper, egg mix, tortillas, and cheese. We place the tortilla on a wrap, place 1 slice of the cheese, torn in half, on the tortilla, use a 3-ounce scoop to put the mix on the cheese, pile the mix in a line, and roll the burrito. Then roll the burrito into the wrap. Get the process? Good. This is something that the afternoon shifts are supposed to be doing to fill 7-ish large trays for the next morning. No big deal until they don't get done. A few shifts after the clocking in debacle, maybe a week or 2 later, the concept of passing time is a real struggle for me. Terry and I are working in the grill together. We run out of burritos and find out when Terry goes to roll them that we are out of the mix, and that we just weren't told that, because communication between the shifts breaks down pretty fast. No problem, right? Well, Jane thought that Terry was just being lazy and didn't want to roll any burritos and told her such.
And then to stop being so dang lazy and just do what I tell you. Now go roll burritos.
So Terry did, without the mix. It took probably 40 only cheese burritos handed out to the customers and 4 phone calls before Jane realized she made a mistake. Terry had made about 140 or so, 7 whole trays worth. Terry knew what she was doing wasn't going to end well, but she was told to roll the burritos, so she did. If anyone has worked fast food, you'll know about something called food costs. It is how much waste food is produced on one shift, and has a significant impact on if a manager is considered for promotions and raises, and is a factor in overall effectiveness as a manager. Jane is responsible for not only all of the waste from this shift, but as the department manager for the kitchen, overall store waste. 140 tortillas is a lot of waste for one shift to produce, and 3/4 of a block of cheese. What we didn't know at the time is that it was the last day of accounting for food costs to receive a bonus check. That little spike of extra food waste lost us our bonus check. It lost us the extra money for the store aside from the bonus check, for things like renovations, uniforms, whatever corporate deems it budgeted for at the time of disbursement, that corporate will give us for meeting certain criteria like food costs. Amazingly, Terry didn't get sent home, and we all got to watch the fallout. Jane is currently on probation because of this mistake, and if something else major happens, she could lose her job. She also isn't allowed to run any shifts on her own during probation, because another manager has to be there if something else happens. I have since left for college, but I'm sure Jane isn't going to be there when I get back. It is hard to change 8 years of anger in one day. All because she didn't believe Terry that we really didn't have the burrito mix. 7. About 2 years ago, I worked for a bank, helping people over the phone. We started noticing a lot of scams going on with iTunes. People would call in saying somebody instructed them to buy $200 to $500 iTunes gift cards for various reasons. I answered the phone one day for an entitled man, and this is how it went. Hello, thank you for calling Kernington. My name is OP. Thank you for coming in fully verified. How can I help you?
Hello, yes, I need to unlock my card to allow me to make a big purchase.
May I ask what you're trying to purchase? I look through his transaction history and I see 2 $500 charges that were declined, and his card was flagged for fraud. They were iTunes gift cards.
Yes, I'm trying to purchase 2 $500 iTunes gift cards. A man called me and told me I won a free trip to Disney. I'm going to take my grandson, but I have to send him $1,000 to pay for our flights.
At this point, my heart sunk. This man thought he was going to get free tickets to Disney for his grandson, but in reality, somebody was taking advantage of his naive nature. I knew I'd have to be the bad guy in telling him it was a scam, but most people thank me for looking out for them. Sir, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but we've been receiving a lot of claims with iTunes gift cards, and that is most definitely a scam, unfortunately. But that is why we locked your card, because we're trying to prevent this from happening to other clients. The fraud department detected a scam, and we locked your card. This sends entitled man into a full meltdown. I had to turn the volume of my headset down from how loud he was screaming. In a store, mind you.
Listen here, you dumb bitch. Unlock my fucking card now or I'll have your job by the end of the day. Don't fucking tell me what I can and cannot do with my money, you ugly cunt. Unlock my card right now.
I stay there in silence and shock. I was trying to help this man, and yet he had the nerve to say all this. I told him that if I unlock the card, there is a 30-minute processing time, and that he is responsible for whatever happens with his money. And that when this comes back as a scam, we will no longer be liable for it, and he will have to call iTunes. He agrees, and I go through the process of unlocking his card. After he hangs up, I make sure to write a lengthy note on this account about the ordeal, because I didn't want anything to fall back on me. About a week later, I get a message from a coworker in the fraud department. He asks if I have time to talk on the phone, and I say of course.
Hello, OP. I have a gentleman on the phone that had called you last week. He claims he's a victim of fraud and that you advised him to unlock his card. Can you explain to me what happened?
I was furious. You can be irresponsible with your own money, but don't try and blame me for your idiotic choices. Especially after I told you not to. I calmly explained to him what happened and told him that he was more than welcome to listen to the phone call. I spent 5 minutes on the phone with him listening to the recording, and after he was practically laughing, he said,
"Thank you, you can hang up now."
And I did something I technically wasn't supposed to, and said, "Have a good day," but I muted myself. He gets back on the line with entitled,
"Hello, sir."
Yeah? What did she say? That it was my fault? You need to fire her and get a more truthful employee. I won't stand for this. I want my money back.
Actually, sir, I reviewed the recording of the phone call, and you gave full consent to unlocking your card, even against my coworker advising you not to. We are not liable for this, as she stated in the call with you. If you wish to call iTunes, feel free. Have a nice day.
Entitled starts screaming into the phone as fraud department hung up. Because I was still on the line, I could hear him screaming into the phone as I sat there giggling to myself. I knew iTunes wouldn't give him any money, as I've seen it happen before with prior cases. Thank God I recorded that note. Maybe that will teach him a lesson on being nice to people trying to help him. 8. Years ago, I used to work as a medical biller for a surgery center. The administrator who ran the place knew I worked construction with my father as well in my off times, doing remodeling and building houses. As such, she commissioned us to do some work for her at her personal home. It was small projects, really. Installing a new garbage disposal, installing a new mailbox, installing a projector in the ceiling, easy stuff. Now, before I get into the main part of this story, I must tell you, she was very stingy with money. We had an autoclave that needed servicing at work, and she refused to pay for the workers' travel time of 2 hours for a 30-minute job. She refused to pay a lot of the medical equipment bills until she was threatened with collection notices or refusal to send any future items. She even told us not to waste patient bands who were no-shows, and instead place another patient sticker over the old ones, which could be a HIPAA violation, but she didn't care. This is important to know. One day, she came to me and asked if we could take a look at her flooring in her exercise room. She said the water heater had busted, and as a result from sitting too long, her flooring had swollen from being waterlogged. My dad and I went over there to assess the situation and determined that we could do the job for a total of $400 plus material. We weren't out to strike it rich, but really to help the community by providing quality service at a low rate. She was happy with the price, and told us she would pick out the new wood she wanted laid down. We told her that she would need about 100 slats for the repair we were going to do, as well as new plywood for the base. She seemed okay with that. She went to Los Angeles one weekend, and came back with material that she wanted to use for the flooring. Only she had about 30 of the requested 100 to do the job properly. On top of that, she did not think that she needed to get a new sheet of plywood. We informed her that the old plywood was moldy, swollen, and would only cause problems down the road. She eventually agreed to purchase the plywood replacement, but she was not going to purchase more wooden slats. Instead, she demanded that we use most of what was already there. Yes, the swollen pieces. But to tear up the slats in the little alcove that was not hit with the water damage, and place the damaged ones there. We did everything we could to convince her this was a bad idea. We told her that wood doesn't magically shrink when it dries out. We told her that joining the swollen pieces with non-swollen pieces would be near impossible. We told her that the moisture would invite more trouble down the road and provide for an uneven floor setting. She was having none of it, she knew better, and did not want to spend more than she already had. So we went to work. We tore up the old pieces, saved the best ones, and started laying down the new pieces first. Then we tore up the pieces in the alcove and matched them with the new pieces too, per her instructions, We placed the least damaged slats in the alcove, doing everything we could to make it look presentable. Lo and behold, it was all uneven. It raised in spots, it had gaps in spots, it didn't fit quite right. But that's what she wanted done, and that's what she was going to get. Despite our best efforts, we were absolutely shocked when she said that the flooring looked horrible, despite us telling her that it would look horrible with the damaged slots. Okay, no, we weren't really shocked at all. She demanded that we tear up the floor again and fix it the right way. We told her, sure, but you'll have to pay us another $400, plus get the other slats that we requested. She got livid, said we were horrible people, and refused to continue on. The next day, I quit the job after she came in and badmouthed my dad in front of my coworkers. But I heard from my coworkers that she had to hire someone else to do the job, and it cost her $1,200 for the labor alone, plus another $400 in wooden slats. All because she was so certain that she knew better than the guys who have been doing the work for years. 9. So I work for a major UK bank, dealing with the giving of refunds for missold payment protection insurance, PPI. Specifically, I'm on the team that deals with complex queries and unusual situations, as well as when the customer has further queries after we have sent out rejection or acceptance after their complaint. A few months ago, the part of our team that calls customers with issues that the normal call centers in India can't deal with was a bit short-handed. And as I'm one of the most senior team members, with knowledge of all the processes our team uses, I was asked to call the customers to assist as I was having a slow day. And my productivity is high enough that I can afford to spend about 2 days a week doing other tasks if need be. Most of these consist of, please explain why my redress payment isn't higher. Please can you run me through how you calculated my refund, etc. With about 1 in 5 requiring specialist knowledge of a particular law or bank process. So enter angry customer, henceforth known as Karen. Karen had been offered a hefty refund sum, around £3,000, well above the average. And we were currently in the process of paying it. Karen had rung up to demand why she wasn't receiving £7,000 plus, as that was what all the TV adverts said. Apparently, we had deliberately lowered her payment because of reasons. Damn reasons. She was kind of unclear. I explained to Karen that the TV adverts are misleading, and that your average complaint handler has no control over the amount of money each customer receives, as things such as date taken out, time PPI was active, etc., are all taken into account and fed through a calculation program, which gives us a figure. Apparently I was lying. Karen demanded that I withdraw her payment and give her a new, more appropriate offer. I explained to the customer that we couldn't just withdraw an offer, and if she felt like she was entitled to more redress, she could take it up with the financial ombudsman, who would review her case. Regardless of their decision, her payment would be going ahead. Karen wasn't having any of it, and demanded I look at her files and personally pay her a bigger sum. Rolling my eyes, I humored her and did a brief scan of her files. Oh, what's this? It looks like Karen was declared bankrupt about 15 years ago, and both the initial contact team and payments had missed it. To be fair, it was kind of well hidden and your average employee wouldn't recognize it. For those who don't know, being bankrupt affects you for the rest of your life, as even when you're discharged, you just go into a less bad bankruptcy. The only way out is to pay back every last penny. Anyway, for PPI, this means she is not entitled to any redress, and furthermore, isn't even allowed to make a complaint. Normally, a procedure in this case is to inform the customer that you will arrange for a colleague to call them back in an hour or so, and then to consult with the insolvency team. The insolvency team will then call the customer back to explain the situation, how it relates to their specific insolvency, and the steps forward. In this case, her offer would be withdrawn, and she would be told her available options. However, I run the insolvency team, and all complex insolvency queries go through me. This means I am authorized to proceed with the call as is. Karen is in the middle of another rant while I'm looking into this, and is again demanding that I withdraw her payment and send her a letter with the amount she deserves. As said before, normally I'd run the customer through the situation and explain what their options to claim the money were. For Karen, though, I apologize to Karen, polite as can be, and tell her that yes, I will be withdrawing her payment and sending her a letter detailing her new redress. Karen huffs and complains it took me long enough, and then hangs up. I delete all her redress off the system, close down the payment memo, and then send the most bare-bones withdrawal of offer due to bankruptcy letter I can. Normally, I fill in a lot of extra details so the customer finds it easy to understand and understands everything. They're rarely happy, but they understand why we have to take that position. However, we don't actually have to do that as per the procedure. Off goes the letter, first class, as the customer did seem like she wanted the new amount quickly. I congratulate myself on doing exactly what the customer wanted. Karen wrote in a few weeks later whining, I ensure the item is routed to our team that reissues letters. This ensures that the exact same letter is sent out, along with a covering letter saying, please find enclosed and requested information. After all, no point in writing a new letter when I've already answered the query once. A bit of information for those who might want to know why being bankrupt affects the refund. If the PPI was sold before the bankruptcy, 99% of cases, then it becomes an asset of the bankruptcy, which means everything that comes from it belongs to the official receiver, bankruptcy owner. This means that if we paid the customer, we'd basically be giving them someone else's money. If we did this knowingly, it can be classed as fraud. Additionally, both our legal team and the official receiver's office have confirmed that the customer isn't allowed to raise a complaint themselves, and that it has to come from them. I do sometimes feel bad for the customers, especially when they think that being discharged from a bankruptcy means it's all over, but there's literally nothing we can do. For us to make payment to the customer, the bankruptcy would need to be annulled. This means that they've paid back every penny, and the customer is treated as if the bankruptcy never happened. 10. I spent several years working at a big box retail store in a small Midwestern town, in the cellular phones department. On slow days in the afternoon before the main rush, I would help set up fixtures and displays throughout the sales floor. A lot of the store planograms or diagrams to set up product are computer-generated based on previous year's sales figures and foot traffic. For instance, say your store sold a lot of sunscreen, sunflower seeds, and condoms during the annual state football tournament. Another story for another time. The computer would create a planogram for an end cap or display to show such items, hoping to generate more sales. The computer would come up with wild combinations that apparently worked so well that when we brought up the bizarre nature of some of the planograms to our leadership, they just shrug and say,
If it's on the planogram, put it up.
You see where I'm going with this? Now, let's set the stage. Our store neighbors a large fairground that houses one of the largest annual powwows in the world, where tens of thousands of folks from around the world come to participate. This powwow has some truly amazing shows and events from surrounding local and regional indigenous tribes, but like any other major event, there are some bad apples. One of the go-to highs in the area is huffing cans of compressed air, and our store routinely sold out during this time, and we sometimes got yelled at for having none on the shelves and would have to call other stores to see if they had any. Unfortunately, huffing, drug use, and public drunkenness became synonymous with the powwow by the non-indigenous locals, rather than a great cultural exchange. The dancing ceremonies in particular are quite impressive, beautiful, and clearly take a lot of time and effort to put together. So the last year I worked at this store, it was the week of the powwow, and I got asked to help set up a computer-generated stack base floor pallet loaded with product. The stack base consisted of disposable cameras, microcassette tapes, and, I shit you not, cans of compressed air. Apparently, those were our largest sellers a year before. This was about 10 to 13 years ago, and camera phones were not as widely available. So I guess people used recorders to record the music on microcassettes. Not wanting to be accused of racist corporate-sponsored high-pushing, I showed the planogram to my direct manager, codenamed Papa Bear, and suggested we swap out the cans of compressed air for obvious reasons. Papa Bear, not wanting to be bothered playing Chips Challenge and Ski Free on the old manager computer in his office, sighed in annoyance and gave me the same old line.
If it's on the planogram, put it out. The computer knows best, so get it done.
Papa Bear was not my favorite boss at all, as his leadership style consisted of waddling out of his office, barking orders, then waddling back like a penguin. For instance, Papa Bear loved getting on our cases for not parking in the wee backlot where employees should park, even when it's icy out, but has no problem parking his sports car in the front because
leadership earned those spots.
In short, he earned the malicious compliance he was about to get, especially since he knew what was on the planogram and heard my specific concerns about how it would be perceived. Not wanting to lose my job and seeing a chance for malicious compliance, I smiled and said, "You got it, boss," and went out to ensure his orders were followed. I was working with a co-worker who we will name Oscar, and he witnessed the exchange I had with Papa Bear, whom Oscar didn't like either. Oscar and I assembled the stack base with the cans of compressed air, bulk packs no less, for longer enjoyment. In the back stockroom, as our plan was to run it to the floor on a pallet jack, drop it off, and run. We didn't want any of our customers thinking we'd assembled this. Scores of stock workers came by, saw what we were putting together, some of them members of the local tribe, and expressed their shock at the level of bad taste. We showed them the planogram, explained very clearly that Papa Bear signed off on it, even though we brought our concerns to him, and continued working. Once we completed the stack base, we conducted a quick bump test to ensure it would survive the hasty deployment. Safety first. Wheeled it to its designated spot near the front registers, and got the hell out of Dodge. It was clearly meant for impulse buying, and the cherry on top was the signage for the pricing sign, which usually had a blurb that said something seasonally along the lines of "Merry Christmas" or "Enjoy Spring." This one, something along the lines of "Enjoy summer events properly." 15 minutes later, I hear a loud, surprised WTF from the front of the store. I could hear it clearly from my station on the other side of the building. Oscar and I looked at each other, knowing full well what was going on. On our department walkie, we heard, "Management to front end for customer courtesy, please," and saw Papa Bear making his way out of the back since he was the only manager on duty, looking fully annoyed and probably completely unaware of the storm he was about to walk into. We could hear the shouting from the rightfully so ticked-off client. Papa Bear was accused of just about everything from racism to being a corporate shill. I don't think we heard him get a single word in. We wanted to feel bad for the customer and the first employee who responded, but knowing Papa Bear was being dished much-needed punishment for not listening to his subordinates when they brought up a genuine concern was very satisfying, almost glorious. Within a minute, we saw a backroom employee take a pallet jack on the floor and wheel the stack base of shame back to the stockroom to be fixed. An hour later, a co-manager, Papa Bear's right hand and an OK boss, came out and asked what happened, as it was our names that assembled the stack base. We explained we went to Papa Bear with our concerns and he told us to assemble it anyway, so we did as we were told. The co-manager nodded in agreement, as he had heard the same from others who saw us assembling the stack base and expressed their concerns. Apparently, the customer filed a complaint with corporate, and so leadership was checking the cameras and everything to get a timeline of events. The co-manager told us we did exactly as we should have by informing management of our concerns and doing our jobs when told to, and then walked back. That was the last Oscar and I heard of the incident, other than a new policy that computer-generated planograms had to be vetted by management first. Papa Bear kept his job, but my stories of him do not end there. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to the Revenge is Ice Cream Archives, episode 19. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories. Oh, it's been an interesting week for me. I got a little space heater in February because, bills are up and things are very expensive. So I got this little heater. I figured it'll be cheaper to run, and it is. And it's been doing a good job keeping me warm. I've been quite happy with it for the most part. But a few days ago, I was like, that smells like burning. That shouldn't be something I'm smelling right now. Turns out the heater itself was, well, it was burning. It was heating a bit too much. And so after investigating a little bit, I found that essentially the plug was melting. The plug on the end of the socket was melting, and I had to force it to get out of the socket. The actual power strip itself, everything else is fine in that, so I'm fairly sure the power strip's okay, but it was the device itself, the plug was clearly melted, and that was unfortunate. So I had to contact the manufacturer, and after I sent them a picture of the plug, the response back to me was, okay, we'll give you a full refund and arrange to have it sent back, which is good because I thought I might have to pay for that myself, which would probably mean I wouldn't have bothered because it can be expensive shipping things. So that's good. So allegedly tomorrow, at some point throughout the day, and by tomorrow I mean the 1st of September, they'll come pick it up, which is also the same day my new one arrives because I wouldn't have wanted a replacement of the same brand. Annoying thing about that is when I ordered it, it was like the only one of its type on Amazon, so I thought, okay, that's obviously just theirs, that's their brand. No, looking now, I'm seeing multiple ones with different brand names slapped on it of that exact design, which I wouldn't have bought if it was, because whenever I see that, I tend to kind of, if it's electrical, I tend to kind of raise an eyebrow, because it means, in my mind, at least, there's poor manufacturing standards. And they're selling them cheap as can be to multiple companies who probably aren't quality checking them before they put the name on them and sell them for varying prices. But I've got it's an Amazon Basics one I have on the way to replace it with. We'll see how that goes. It looks okay, has more or less the same kind of specs, and I've had good luck with Amazon Basics products before, so we'll see how that goes. And with that, I'm going to stop talking your ear off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.